Want to do more with your PDFs for free? This is MacVoices. MacVoices is sponsored by Upstart, fair and fast personal loans. Go to upstart.com/MacVoices and find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we got our Take Control authors back on track, and I'm really excited about that because that always means that I'm going to learn something, and it means that almost certainly you're going to learn something as well. This time, we have Mr. Michael E. Cohen, who is the author of the latest edition, the third edition of Take Control of PDFpen. Michael, great to have you. Thanks so much.
Nice to see you again, Chuck.
Yeah,
if I keep looking off to the side, it's because that's where your image is next to the image of me on the screen. So maybe if I move the window so you're directly below the camera, that's better.
Okay, yeah, there I am. There I am. So, first of all, glad you made it through lockdown. Glad to have you back. We've really missed talking to you, but it looks like you've been busy with yet another edition of Take Control of PDFpen. And of course, PDFpen is from Smile. And somewhere under the heading of full disclosure here, Smile does help support MacVoices, and that support is really greatly appreciated. But that has nothing to do with why we're talking about this book, because we're talking about the book because... Yeah.
To be fully disclosed, Smile also pays for the book because we had done a few editions of the book for Take Control, and they liked it so much they decided to bundle it with their software. So they decided to pay us a fee for every new edition. We give the book away for free to anybody who wants it, and so they pay for the book. So in a sense, Smile is paying for both your end and my end of this conversation. Thanks, Philip.
Which is fine because, first of all, we don't do this because they are sponsoring either one of us or both of us. We're talking about this because this is a great program. I know it's one that I absolutely use. It has saved my bacon more than once. And so anytime there's an update to any of it or to this book to help me use it a little more effectively, I get excited about it.
Well, the fact is we began doing the book at Take Control because we liked the product. It was only after we'd done a few versions of it that they decided to bundle and make it a purchased book. Yeah. Which is great because it means I know every year what I'll be doing long about this time of year. Because whenever they come out with a new version, new book, and it costs you, the viewer, nothing. You don't even have to buy the software to get the book. You can go right to Take Control Books and download a free copy if you're interested in seeing what it does. So,
which is a great point, because if you are not sure if PDFpen is for you, then go take a look at the books. Michael will tell you what all can be done with it and why you should at least consider it. But this time, from what you told me, Michael, this is a little bit different kind of a revision to the book and a revision to the software.
It was quite a bit of work for me, actually. And at the same time, usually every time a program is updated, a new version comes out, it's because they're loading new features into it. This time around, there are very, very few actually new features, and they're relatively small. What Smile did instead was take advantage of the fact that Apple came out with Big Sur and has begun to really revamp how the Mac OS itself looks. And so they kind of took that opportunity to revamp how PDFpen looks on screen and how it operates. Almost all the tools, the toolbars, have been completely redesigned and rearranged, which meant that almost every single screenshot in the book had to be reshot. And every single icon, we have these inline icons when we're describing, click this button, it shows you the icon right in the text. All of those had to be changed as well because they all changed. And for the better, I have to add. In the process of doing this revision, I actually had to use the product extensively because I had to shoot every single screenshot, which meant using the product to set it up and everything else. I really like the new arrangement. It's much better. Wasn't bad before, but it's much better.
That's usually my experience, that when you have a developer step back and take a look at the way a product, in this case a pretty mature product like PDFpen has developed, and they decide to do a revision of the interface, it always comes out better, just because it's a fresh look, it's a fresh rethinking of the way you approach the projects you do with it.
Well, yeah. Well, you'll develop a product initially, and we'll have a set of features, and the interface will be designed to access those features. And then year after year, or release after release, you add stuff to it, and pretty soon you're bolting stuff onto the side, and it begins to look like the car designed by Homer Simpson in that episode years ago, where it had a blender, a microwave oven in it. Anyway, you couldn't find anything, and so after years of updates and updates, Smile took a fresh look and said, well, we have all of these tools. Let's arrange them in a better way so people can get at them more easily, logically, intuitively. And that's what they did.
Now, does this, well, the book obviously covers both the Mac versions and iOS and iPadOS versions.
Mm-hmm.
Does the redesign go across all of those platforms, or is this primarily a Mac redesign?
The iOS version is still pretty much the way it was. I mean, the last edition of the book covered it, version 5.1 something of the iOS, iPadOS. This book covers version 6.02, which is the most recent version, but that hasn't changed significantly. It still looks and acts very much as it did before. A little more polished, a little smoother, as always is the case, but it's not as radical a rethinking. That's not to say that can't happen further down the road, because now that they've done the Mac side of it, they've got the opportunity to think about, well, what do we want to do on the tablet phone side to bring it into a line? So that could happen down the road, but if it does, is anybody's guess. But no, the iOS version, though, is there the way it was before. And about 80% of the book is about the Mac version anyway.
Okay, so let's talk about what, I mean, from your standpoint, how do you observe the interface being so much better?
Among other things, in the previous versions of PDFpen, you had a toolbar lower down just above the window, and on it there was like the segmented button. If you wanted the drawing tools, you clicked one button and it brought the drawing tools into view, so you could then scribble something or put a note or something else. Or if you wanted to do editing, you had to click the other side of the button. It would bring up all the editing tools. You could select text and so on and so forth. So you were always toggling between those two. What they did this time was take advantage of the Mac Windows standard toolbar area to put all of the drawing and annotation tools up there and make the editing bar stable and steady for selecting text and changing the appearance of things that are already on the screen. So basically it breaks down into a hierarchy where the top stuff is for adding to a PDF or for changing your view of it if you want to zoom in or zoom out. But it had the tools for annotations, for adding form elements, for doing highlighting, putting text imprints, that sort of stuff. And the editing bar has things for selecting text, selecting objects, doing fine-tune editing, measurements, and for selected objects, changing their appearance. Like, does it have a border? What color is the border? That sort of thing. So the editing bar is for changing how things look. The top bar is for adding stuff to the PDF. And that makes a whole lot more sense, and it's a lot easier to get at the drawing tools because they're always there.
Yeah, and that appeals to me right away, because it's like the majority of the capabilities of the program are instantly accessible, as opposed to having to chase them down through menus or call up different options.
Mm-hmm. And in the process, they've also redesigned the icons a little bit there. They've taken on the same design languages you're going to see throughout Big Sur and other apps as well. Sort of flatter, more black and white rather than lots of color and shadow, easy to make out. So they spend a lot of work on both the artwork and the logic of it. And yet when you open it up, it will still look like PDFpen to you. That's the odd thing.
Well, that's good. I mean, at least you won't have any problems about figuring out where to start.
Exactly. It was an odd experience because, I would think, well, am I going to know how to find the stuff I need in order to write the book? And I hardly ever stumbled trying to find something. I would just look at the screen and go, oh yeah, it's this thingy. Oh, it's that thingy. Yeah, that's where it is now. Nothing was hidden.
Well, so this has to be a borderline complete rewrite of the book, because just because the interfaces have changed doesn't mean, the capabilities are still there.
Exactly.
But how you access them is a bit more of a challenge.
Well, the step-by-step stuff, would change a bit because I'd have to say click here instead of click there and all of that. But in terms of the actual functionality, adding an imprint, well, once you've got the imprint tool, you click and you do this and it works the same. So, a large part of the book didn't change that much. Because a large part of the book explains how PDFs work and how the things you put in them affect the PDF, which are independent of exactly where you click and what the thing you click on looks like. The earlier part of the book consists of, I guess you'd call it an atlas of the program, because there's a whole section on where you find the drawing tools, the font, the text formatting tools, and so on and so forth. So that got more extensively rewritten. But the later stuff, how you design a form, well, you design a form the way you always did. How do you add, correct text in a PDF? Well, the way you always did. So that stuff didn't change that much. But everything, I had to read the entire book word by word because I had to make sure I didn't miss anything. And try everything out to make sure it worked the same way. There's a whole phase when you're writing a book called editing, and editing breaks down into copy editing, where you're dealing with the words in the text, and what's called tech editing, where you're checking the text against what actually works in the real world to make sure that your book is actually describing what people will see. So I had to do a complete tech edit of the book in the process of doing this revision.
Just as a little bit of inside baseball, the Take Control folks usually, sometimes you will edit your own books, but for the most part, you have an editor, and a lot of times you have a separate tech editor.
Right. In this particular case, I didn't have a tech editor. I did have Joe, who was my copy editor, because he and I get along pretty well on that regard. But I did have access to, the Smile staff the entire way. So anytime, I had a question about, is it supposed to work this way or that way? I could dash off an email and usually get an answer within an hour as to, yes, it works this way. No, it doesn't. We changed this, we changed that. And they've been very responsive and very good. They're great people to work with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And also, before the book is finished, we send them a copy and they read through it and note anything I may have gotten wrong or forgot to mention. And send it back so I can incorporate those changes, which we did again.
And you didn't miss anything, right?
Oh no, there's a guy at Smile who found 4 particularly interesting things that I didn't know about that were great last-minute additions. So they do help.
And, I like this approach. So Smile subsidizes a professional writer and a high-quality professional writer, as all the Take Control authors are, to create basically it's beyond a manual for the book.
Right.
And software documentation we've all talked about so much seems to have that art and that science of creating the documentation has all gone kind of by the wayside in favor of a lot of short, small little video clips, which nothing wrong with those. And in a lot of cases, depending on the program, they're hyper beneficial. But there's still something about having a good solid manual to take you through, explain what the tools do, and also sort of remind you that, hey, this is something you can do with the program that maybe is not you don't realize it on first blush.
Well, I've been in the business of actually writing manuals for products, as well as writing books about products, which is a slightly different thing. A manual has the task of, explaining to the user how all the features work, where they are, what you can do with them, and providing the technical information. A Take Control book usually gives you a little bit more and takes a slightly different look, and always has. It's how to take control of the product. It doesn't have to cover every single feature, but those things it does cover, it tries to explain why you want to do it this way or why it may be this way. There's a whole chapter in Take Control of PDFpen where I talk about the history of PDFs, why PDFs are the way they are, and what they have inside of them, which is why you have to do some of the odd things you do sometimes when editing a PDF. A manual won't give you that, because that's not the business of a manual. But if you're really going to take control of a product, it helps to have context. And so that's part of what we do in a Take Control book. And that's what we did originally when we wrote the book before Smile decided to sponsor it. But now that they're sponsoring it, I still do that. At the same time, Smile also has a complete online user guide that comes with PDFpen. You can go right online and get the online help right there. So it's all there. They're complementary. They kind of work together.
MacVoices is sponsored by Upstart, fair and fast personal loans. Go to upstart.com/MacVoices and find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments. Upstart is your first step in cutting back those big credit card balances that come from high interest rates. Whether you need a loan to help with debt consolidation, education, personal expense, or large purchases, Upstart can help. Upstart is a different kind of lender. Their lending platform is based on artificial intelligence. That lets them evaluate your loan request based on more than just your credit score. Things like your employment history and income are also factored in so that you have access to smarter rates. Customers have rated Upstart 4.9 stars on Trustpilot and Credit Karma. They rank #1 in personal loans for customer satisfaction on LendingTree and have been featured in Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and CNBC. Shouldn't you be checking out what Upstart can do for you? Visit upstart.com/MacVoices. Find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments today. That's upstart.com/MacVoices. Loan amounts will be determined based on your credit, income, and certain other information provided in your loan application. Upstart.com/MacVoices. Thanks to Upstart for their support of MacVoices. An interesting phrase that you've used now a couple times about what's inside a PDF. Most of us think of PDFs as kind of obvious. There's text in there, there's graphics in there, and maybe, and what else? Right off the bat, I can't think of anything else. Obviously, formatting of that kind of thing. But what else is in there that makes it interesting that you say you have to understand that to know what you want to do or how to go about editing it?
Well, you partly have to understand why PDFs exist in the first place. They go back a long ways in computer terms. I first heard about them in the early 1990s. When I was working at the Voyager company in Santa Monica, we were doing multimedia. And we wanted to do ebooks. Nobody had ever done ebooks. Ebooks didn't exist. We wanted to invent them. We were trying to invent them. And we had a visitor from Adobe come to talk about their new PDF stuff, which wasn't even called PDF at the time. It hadn't even been named yet, but it was a way of creating a computer file that could replicate what you printed. No matter what computer you were on, it would always print the same. In other words, it was to produce final copy. You could have programs that generate PDFs that you then produce perfect copies. You could send the PDF to a publisher and it get printed right away. The whole point was to faithfully replicate the look of a document. It wasn't ever to edit it. It was a final form. It was a substitute for paper. Immutable, unchangeable. Except being on a computer, it's not completely immutable and it's not completely unchangeable because computers are like that. So what a PDF has in it are the drawing instructions for drawing on the printer or for drawing on the screen the look of the document, what is in the document. Those don't have to make any sense to anybody else except something that draws. A PDF doesn't know what a word is. It doesn't know what a paragraph is, like a word processor kind of has to know. It just has a set of instructions. Start drawing here, stop drawing there. Draw this string of characters here on the screen. Draw that string of characters there on the screen. Draw a line from here to there. Draw a shade from there to there. So it's a whole bunch of instructions. It's basically a scaled down version of the PostScript language, which was used to drive laser printers. Encapsulated PostScript in a sense. A portable document format with drawing instructions to it. If you break open a PDF even now, you may have a novel, which is, paragraph after paragraph of text, but it may not appear in quite that order in the PDF because it's wherever it needs to be in order to be drawn well on the screen. So there's no real semantic underpinning to the original PDF specification, certainly. And they also built a data structure for PDFs where you could add stuff to them, kind of hanging it like ornaments on a Christmas tree, where you had a basic spine of drawing instructions and then little bits and pieces. You may add a form element here, an added logo there. And so it's a very complicated structure, and it's not really designed to be edited well. The fact that PDFpen lets you edit PDFs is big magic in its own right, because these things really are meant to be sort of stable. They're meant to be final copy. A PDF is meant to be final copy. It wants to be final copy. And once you understand that, you'll understand why there are some limitations to what anything PDFpen or Adobe Acrobat or any of the other PDF editors can do. It's because of the very nature of a PDF itself. And so I give a little history and discussion of what's inside a PDF in the book, which a manual is not going to give you because that's not the job of a manual.
Interesting. I remember when PDFs first came out. Back then, the font issues were a lot bigger deal than they are now, and I think it's mainly because all the operating systems now come with so many of the same fonts that you don't run into it unless you're using some esoteric display font or something that is typographically different or really interesting.
Well, the thing about a PDF is technically you wouldn't need to have the fonts. A PDF can encapsulate a subset of the fonts you use in the document, so it can be printed even on computers that don't have that font. But the specification allows a PDF to not store them and to use the built-in fonts and makes the PDF smaller. But in that case, if you don't have Times New Roman and the PDF uses Times New Roman, you're kind of out of luck. But if it's encapsulated and put into the PDF itself, it's there.
Right, which is why it's so good for so many things in the modern world, because we throw photos in PDFs, we throw all kind of crazy design design graphics in PDFs, and it just works. You take it to Staples and say, "Here, print this," and it does.
Well, that's because a PDF is, as it's advertised, a portable document format. Portable, meaning you can carry it from place to place, from machine to machine. That was its whole reason for beginning. And by the way, that's the reason we couldn't use it for the expanded books back at Voyager, because we wanted to actually work with the words and the text in the book as part of our user experience. PDF didn't care about that, but our expanded books did. They didn't look like the printed book, but they were great for reading on a computer screen. A PDF, on the other hand, was really good for printing out something on your computer, whether you had a small screen or a big screen, a dot matrix printer or a laser printer. You could give it the PDF and it would print out the same way. It wasn't meant to be a great on-screen experience.
Yeah, and even today, and I mean, look, PDFs are not magic, all right? You can't give it a 640 by 360 image and have it scale perfectly. On the other hand, though, if you design a PDF right and feed it the right information, you can take an image and scale it up to a ridiculous size.
Oh, yeah.
and still not have the file be obnoxiously large, and have a huge compatibility range with all kind of printing devices.
Well, that's true because they're images and they're images. Something like a photograph is what's called a raster image, basically. It's a whole bunch of dots of different color. The more dots, the higher the resolution. The more colors a dot can show you, the bigger the color range. But that takes up a huge amount of space. Another way of doing drawings is by giving instructions for a drawing. Put your pen here, make it this wide, draw from here to there, tapering the size of the pen as you go by this amount. You're basically giving it drawing instructions. So you can have a very large, very complex drawing, but the instructions don't have to be all that large. And that's when you have things, programs like Illustrator, which are designed to do vector drawing, which don't necessarily take up as much room and can be very high resolution, because to scale it, all you have to do is change some of the numbers. Instead of drawing from point A at 6.3 inches to point B at 8.4, you double them and suddenly you got a much longer line, but the drawing instructions are the same size.
I think in the past we've likened it to the photos are like a cake, and the vectors are like the recipe for the cake.
Something like that, yeah. It kind of works out that way.
It's not a perfect analogy, but something like that.
Because, you can actually eat the cake, whereas you can't eat the recipe. But with a PDF, you can certainly read the PDF. So it's a recipe that cooks itself on your screen in real time.
There you go. Okay. You improved my analogy. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's good. Yeah, but PDFs, I think it's so important for people to understand that you can edit PDFs.
Mm-hmm.
There are limits, and you've alluded to that, but you can do a lot of things with PDF if you have the right tool,
Mm-hmm.
and PDFpen is one of those right tools.
Well, even in the book, there's a whole chapter on how to make a PDF from scratch. From things you bring in from a word processor, illustrating program, or what have you, to build your own PDF. Most of the time, people make a PDF by opening up Word, doing all their formatting in Word, making it look good in Word, and then printing it to a PDF instead of to a printer. And they're done, and they have a document that looks like what they would have printed. And that's certainly an easy way to do it, but you can also do it from scratch. You can bring in your own text, plop it here, plop it there, bring in your own pictures, plop them here, plop them there. You can do all of that with PDFpen as well.
Does that result in a better PDF, Michael? I never really thought about it.
It really depends on what you're trying to build. If you've got a document, that's like a legal document, with a bunch of paragraphs and subsections, do it in your word processor. But if you have to do a quick brochure, it may be easier just to put it right on the paper in a PDF and be done with it. Lost cat, little paragraph describing it, picture of the cat, little images of where to tear off the phone number, you're done. You don't have to do that in Word, which might actually be harder.
Interesting. I always think of PDFpen as an editing tool
Mm-hmm.
to do things to PDFs I've already gotten.
And usually it is, but it doesn't have to be.
Huh. Okay, got to go back and take another look.
You can also build a PDF out of bits and pieces of other PDFs. You can steal a page from this PDF, and from that PDF, you can use the rectangle selection tool to select a part of a page in one PDF and make a full page out of that selection in another PDF. So PDFpen lets you do stuff like that too.
Yeah, things you definitely can't do in Word or any other word processor.
Certainly not easily. If you're clever and you'd like to lie to your software a lot, you can get away with murder. But you have to be inventive and try to convince it to do things it didn't know it could.
I would assume by that
that's my career, actually.
Yeah, well, yeah. I would assume what you're talking about is maybe take a page in Word, do a screenshot of it that turns it into a graphic, then
Yeah,
bring that back in and stretch it, which is
which you could do in
a lot
PDFpen.
of
And
trouble.
then once you bring it into PDFpen and stretch and manipulate the graphic, then you can run optical character recognition on it and turn that picture back into editable words in the PDF. There's one there's one small set of illustrations in the book that literally go back to, I guess, the late 1970s. I'd written a ridiculous comic brochure about, an imaginary company that sold stuff to keep you protected from alien invasions, which I gave to my friends. It was a little joke pamphlet, and it was all done on a Smith Corona typewriter. Well, I happened to have a scan of that document in my files, so I brought a page of it into PDFpen and did optical character recognition on it so I could actually edit the text of it. And I show you what the difference between the ugly scanned JPEG text looks like and what it looks like after I OCR'd it, and the corrections it made, the mistakes that it made, and how you fix those mistakes. So yeah, you can bring in stuff into PDFs that had never been on a computer before because they're too old, and then you can turn them back into text.
And you can take things that were intended, they were created as text and delivered to you as not text and turn them back into text. And
Exactly.
I know these are not new features, but I mean, a story that I can tell is that I just recently, on a Friday afternoon, I got a 30-page contract that I was supposed to review for a couple particular items. And it's like, oh, this is hours worth of work. And I took it into PDFpen. I scanned it. I took it into PDFpen. I OCR'd it. Now I've got text. Now I can do a simple search for some of the key terms. And after about 7 searches, I had the whole thing done in, well under an hour, as opposed to shooting the better part of the weekend. And those are the kind of things that you need to understand, the power that PDFpen gives you and the ways you can use it to your advantage.
On the one hand, OCR is usually not perfect. If it's like 99% perfect, it means it makes a mistake 1 every 100 words. But that's okay, because if you're doing an OCR primarily for searching a document, chances are it will translate correctly the stuff you need. It certainly makes an image searchable that was never searchable before. Perfect accuracy is not a requirement for that sort of application. Just really high accuracy, and PDFpen does a very accurate job of OCR. In fact, that typewritten thing that I was telling you about a second ago, in an earlier version of the book when I did the OCR, it made a lot more mistakes than this time when I did it in the book. There were only like 2 or 3 on this very fuzzy picture, whereas in the first book there were like, dozens. So the OCR has gotten better, even though the material remained the same.
And it depends. Now you're working on like you said, a fuzzy image, but if you had the better quality of the PDF image from its originator, the higher quality of the OCR, the better results you're going to get. So, yeah.
I've actually amused myself from time to time if I go to a restaurant. Back when you could go to a restaurant, and maybe you will do it again, I would sometimes, take a picture of the menu if there were interesting items on it, and then I would bring it into PDFpen and do an OCR on it, so I could do a search of dishes served in various restaurants, and it usually worked out quite well for me. Even though I was working from a photograph shot in a restaurant off of a phone camera, a few years ago, they weren't as good as they are now, so it might be a very fuzzy picture taken at a weird light. But the OCR usually works out well for me.
That's it. We have so many tools at our command now, and sometimes we just need people to hold our hands a little bit and remind us that, hey, yeah, that's a camera, and that's great for taking a picture of your cat, but you can also do this, this, and this with it. And if you combine it with something like PDFpen, then you can do this, this, and this. And you see the light bulbs pop on. It's like, wow, I would not have thought about that. So that's why I'm so glad this book is here.
You have all the tools you need if only you thought to use them that way.
Yep. Well, so the book is out now. It's, of
Mhm.
course, at takecontrolbooks.com. And at this point in the interview, I'd usually say, so what's it cost, Michael? But this one
It
is free.
costs
You
nothing.
go and download it right now, and
Sure,
find out what you're missing.
exactly. It's a little over 200 pages long, lots and lots of pictures. God, I know there are lots of pictures because I took every single one.
So at the very least, help Michael out by downloading it so he feels appreciated, right?
Actually, I do. I've gotten very nice compliments from Smile, and that's all that really matters because they, as far as I'm concerned, they are my customer at this point. If they're happy, I'm happy. But what I'm really happiest is if my readers get something out of the book. And since it's free, they've got an even chance of getting the book to find out if it's useful. So
Agreed. So I'm sure you will be back here soon because I know there's some other projects in the works. There always are.
Joe at Take Control is always tossing me something over the transom. Yeah, I'll probably
Yeah.
have to do another revision of the Pages book now that it's up to version 10.
Should I ask about how much you're looking forward to that?
Oh, hold me back! I can't wait.
Well, at least some of us will be looking forward to your return to talk about that because that's always a fun
Don't get me wrong. I
conversation.
really do like the program Pages. It's just when you've edited the same book, half a dozen or more times, it's tough to get really super excited because you just remember how much work it was the first time around. And it's also a chance to say, oh my God, what did I used to know that's now wrong? There was a comedy group in the late 60s, 70s called the Firesign Theater, and one of their albums was titled, Everything You Know Is Wrong. And I feel that, every day when I have to start writing about a piece of software I've written about before, I feel how true that statement is. Everything I know is wrong.
It's funny you say it that way because Joe and I just talked about the new Take Control of your backups.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a point that he made that, so much of the thinking we've had before, our philosophies and all, are just no longer applicable. They're just, that's a nice way of saying they're wrong. So he's trying to teach us how to rethink it. And that's what you guys have to do every time there's a software revision come out.
I can't tell you how many things I have blissfully forgotten because I no longer need to know them. Which, how to, for example, diagnose extension conflicts on Mac OS 9. Remember the extensions manager? I don't need any of that specialized knowledge. I don't need any specialized knowledge of the resource editor, to change the looks of icons. Oh, all that stuff I don't need to know anymore.
Yep,
At the same
you're
time,
right.
it was hard-fought knowledge at the time.
And it was important knowledge at the time.
Very important, but, it's not important now.
No, but that's part of the learning process and building it to where we are now.
I think the biggest skill you can have when using computers is to, as you approach a new problem, divest yourself of as many assumptions as you can going in and look at it as freshly as you can, because you may find ways into that problem that you didn't think existed because you're approaching it from an older paradigm. Think about the tools you have and the needs you have now.
This conversation has gotten very philosophical. I don't know what happened.
Yeah,
I like
I'm
it.
sorry about that. I do get philosophical, usually around 1 in the afternoon.
Where can folks follow you on social media? Are you still on social media?
For better or worse, yeah, you can find me on Twitter as Lymond, Lymond. Long story behind that, but if you know of an author named Dorothy Dunnett, you'll understand. If you don't, doesn't matter. That's why I'm on Twitter. You can also find me at Tidbits. I usually write articles there from time to time. And Lymond@mac.com is my email address should you wish to write to me. I have a Mac.com address. I jumped on board very early in the game.
Great. Michael, thank you. It's so good to see you. Really appreciate the book. Congratulations on yet another edition. And
Thank you.
we'll be back to talk to you next time.
It's great to see you again, Chuck.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. Now look, there is no reason that you should not go to takecontrolbooks.com and download this book because it is free. If you're a PDFpen user, you're probably going to learn some things. If you are not a PDFpen user, you will find out why you should be. So go get it right now. I'm Chuck Joyner. Until the next time, thanks for watching.
Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.